As Tricia said, I'm Deb Vilmont. This is Jane Ann Benson. I'm going to give you a little bit of background about myself, and then we'll have Jane Ann do that, just so you can kind of see where our experience is coming from in terms of classroom management. When Tricia first said this is the topic everybody wants, and we went classroom management, hour and a half, whoa, yikes. Okay, we'll try to do this. I teach a whole semester on guidance in the classroom and classroom management, CD 215, adult-child interaction, if anybody is interested in it. So for 15 weeks we talk about this topic. My background kind of comes in, and I was a student here. I got my associate's degree from here in child development, and then I started teaching. I've taught in various early childhood centers, infant toddlers, preschoolers. I was a director for a while. God bless Jane Ann. I did it for about a year and that was it. But a lot of experience in the classroom, and I like to say a lot of experience making mistakes in the classroom and leading me to this, knowing what some of the tips are before you ever walk into a classroom, how you set that classroom up changes what happens with children in that classroom. And so I hope there's probably 20 some years experience there of bringing that into making mistakes is what you learn more from in how to set up a classroom. Okay, so that's a little bit about my background. And I'm Jane Ann Benson, and I also teach in the department, but my full-time job is as the director at the lab preschool. And prior to that, I was the director in a private program here in Grand Rapids, and actually worked with Deb, was one of my teachers. And so we've known each other a long time. Prior to that, I really taught all the different age groups that Deb, infant toddlers, preschool, school agers, kindergarten, pre-K. And I have to agree 100% with Deb that one of the biggest things that I see is it takes years to develop the skills of being able to manage and guide your classroom. And one of the ways in which I wish I had known more of these tips, we talk so much about curriculum in classrooms, but really if you don't have management in your classroom, you have such a difficult time getting to the point of curriculum in your classroom. So it's exciting to think about this, but it is something that we get calls probably 3 or 4 times a week to present on, to go out to guide programs, particularly in that birth to 5 years of age. We get a lot of people saying, how do we deal with this? Or this is happening in our classroom, what can we do? And oftentimes going back to these things that we're going to cover today are the first things that we talk about. What we're not going to have an opportunity to talk today about are those really difficult individual concerns that we have in classrooms about specific children. Because those, again, would take a whole semester. Certainly you can come up and chat with us about that and see if we can brainstorm some of those things. But I do believe that those specific cases are a whole semester too. One of the things that as we were kind of thinking about, boy, if you could hand somebody 4 tips, 5 tips to get ready for their classroom, because I think what often happens is you have to start somewhere. And what we wanted to think about, what would be really 4 good tips no matter what age group you were hoping to teach. Whether you are going to teach in an early childhood classroom, elementary ed, or secondary, middle school or high school classroom, what are some things that you really need to think about in your classroom? Now, how many of you know teachers already, working day in and day out? I always say working in the trenches. They're there every day. You guys know people already? You're probably hearing some things from them already about what they're dealing with in the classroom, right? Numbers of children in the classroom, some of the behaviors that they're seeing in the classroom. It's a different world from when you guys were in school and when you were in those classrooms. Children are coming with more challenges. So what we kind of want to do is think about what does a well-managed classroom actually look like, and get you guys to kind of brainstorm on this a little bit. So at your tables you have some paper and some markers, and we want you to kind of group together with the people that you're by and just sort of brainstorm on that piece of paper. What does a well-managed classroom look like? And you can do it from any perspective. Your high school, your middle school, your early childhood, your elementary. What would you think that would look like? Okay, here's what we kind of want to do with this. Now I'd like you just to sort of set those off to the side, because we've sort of walked around and kind of have an idea of what your thinking is a little bit. And we'll come back and revisit these in a minute. I want to give you this quote here. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Harry Wong or not, but he does a lot of work around classroom management. You can Google him, you get some great information, and especially a lot of work with our elementary ed and secondary ed students. But I found this quote of his that's you see this from him a lot. And I just thought it really kind of touched and hit into what we were thinking about today. It says, classroom management refers to all the things that a teacher does to organize students, space, time, and materials so that instruction in content and student learning can take place. It kind of is that, how do I set the stage before I ever get students there? What things do I need to think about? What are those 4 key points? What are those guidelines before I ever get students there? Okay, so that's kind of what we want to focus on a little bit today. The first area we're going to take a look in is environment. How many of you know teachers that they go into their classrooms the week before school starts and they're like, I have to get my classroom ready? Right? Environment seems to be the key. It's what kids see when they first walk in, right? It sets the tone for what the classroom is going to be like. It is also your co-teacher. Think of your environment, think of it as your co-teacher. It either can work support you or against you. Your environment really can. Yeah, I really like what Jane Ann said when she said it can work for you or against you. One of the things I always think about is right away, how do we arrange the furniture? Depending on what age group you're going to be with, are they going to be at tables? Do they need to have floor space? How is that furniture going to be arranged? Am I going to be able to have centers somewhere in that classroom, even if it's an elementary classroom? Is it important that my children have stations and have centers and things to do? I found this picture, I thought it was really cool because one of the things with this picture is you can kind of see already without even being in that classroom kind of what the stations are, what the centers are. What else do you really notice about this? It's colorful. It's colorful. It's inviting, it's colorful, it's attractive. If you were a child, would that be a place that you might want to go? It wouldn't be so bad having to go sit and talk with the teacher, right? Because doesn't that look what that place is all about? You're going to have some meetings there and you're going to go sit there. So the furniture, how is it set up? What kinds of centers do we have? Is it inviting? Is it colorful and attractive?
You also think about that from a parent's and family's perspective when they go into a classroom. Does it look inviting? That's one of the things that parents often want to have it be inviting for them also. So looking at it from the child, but also from the family's perspective too.
One of the things I want to think about too with furniture arrangement, have you ever noticed some classrooms when you walk in right away and there's this sense of calm in the classroom? You know, you feel those classrooms and you go in and you think, oh, that's a place I want to be. It feels like a place for me. Then you walk into classrooms and how many of you walk in and go, oh, I immediately want to run, I want to walk away, I want to run, right? There's some chaos to that environment. One of the things that we do with furniture is we make sure we use our furniture to block off areas, divide spaces, define spaces for children. What happens if you have an area just like this in the classroom? They're going to run. And they're going to run, and they're going to run, and they're going to run.
To do that. So it's our job to set up that space. And I always say, when I go into a classroom and when I say it's set up like a furniture store, like kind of everything's around the edges, and there's that you walk in and you feel like it's just on display. It doesn't feel like you want to go in and really connect to that space. So that when Deb was talking about that whole idea of, you know, are you drawn to say, oh, that's where the science area is, oh, that's where the math area is. And in elementary classrooms too, you oftentimes will see that with books, like, oh, that's where the books live in this classroom, or that sort of idea.
So as Jane Ann talks about, these are where the things are, do you notice what comes up? The organizations. Things have a place where they live. Okay? Things are organized, materials are labeled, students have access and independence. One of the key things of building a sense of community in your classroom and getting children to kind of buy in to that this space is theirs and this is a place I want to be a part of and this is a place I want to take care of is that it's not a furniture store. It's a place that looks like I get to use this stuff. Do you remember when your teacher kept that stuff way up high on a shelf or in a locked cabinet? And even though you had all this great stuff out in your classroom, how many of you just were dying to get at that stuff that was at the top? Because it was off limits, right? What was so important about that stuff that it had to be up there? Why can't it be down here? We need children to feel a part of that space. We need them to be able to be independent. How do you expect children to pick up their materials if you don't have organized spaces and places where those materials live?
And that starts young. That can start with infant in an infant classroom and toddler classroom. And certainly, sometimes when I'm in a classroom and they want me to come in to look at the space and say what the feedback about management, and I can be in a toddler classroom and they have all the toddler books where the toddlers can't get to them. They don't have an area that toddlers, so they're trying to get to those books and usually scaling up things to get, or not having enough of those materials. But there's that idea of not having access to what toddlers or preschoolers or school agers need, or elementary age children need.
One of the things in labeling the materials is you will often see that things are labeled. So right on the bookshelf it says bookshelf. Children see a picture of books and they see the word in print, bookshelf. So they know that's where my materials go. But it doesn't just need to be the teacher that's made those labels. Can you guys read what that area is? Art area.
And that's 3.
Art area. So children can help organize that space with you. What better way to get them to take ownership of the space and being able to put things away by having them participate in labeling the areas, naming the areas, actually creating some of those labels for that. I want to go back a minute to one thing though. Woo, is making anybody sick yet? You see this thing at the bottom where it says soft and alone spaces? Did you have elementary classrooms that had like squishy places, there we go, squishy places that you could go and sit when it was silent reading time? Or how many of you as a kid used to hide in your closet just so you had that kind of, or built forts under the dining room table, right? Children need those alone spaces, those soft spaces. And oftentimes we forget that they need those in classrooms as well. When you are 6 and 7 and 8 or 3 and 4 and you're with a group of 20 plus children all day long from 8 in the morning or 6:30 in the morning until the late afternoon, after a while you start to get a little agitated, right? Because when you put children in a close space for a long time, and especially like right now it's so cold and they can't get outside, they start to change their behaviors a little bit. And they need those little nooks and crannies and those soft spaces to go off and have some private time.
So that's a really important thing, that oftentimes there's that group sense instead of looking at individually. Some children need, I mean, in this classroom here, we would probably find that some of you prefer to be more alone than with a group. And you have to really have your classroom reflect that, so that that's also, and that's, I see children do that if they don't have that in their classroom. They're trying to put a blanket over a table so that they get a space, or they sit in their cubby because they want that space. So they're trying to self-regulate to get that.
Right.
Unfortunately, in elementary, sometimes there's no place except their desk in which to do that. So trying to make sure that that same concept is in the elementary.
Understanding that children need those spaces will eliminate that behavior issue that you might have, that students then go and try to hide behind a shelf or go somewhere where you can't see them. Giving them that alone space then takes away that, what I like to call adult cause behavior problems, because you haven't thought about that and you haven't created that space for them.
You often hear with elementary, leave me alone. They're oftentimes even saying that.
Yeah, I need my space. Okay, our second key point here, relationships. One of the main things that I often hear from students is, what do children need to learn? And I hear they need to learn respect, right? Well, you know that old saying, in order to give respect, to get respect, you need to give respect, you need to earn it, right? So part of building relationships with children, giving them that they feel this is a sense of community, this is an environment that I'm expected to engage in, it can become my space that I can work in. I need to have relationships with them. I need to build a safety net for them. I need them to feel comfortable with me and want to come and talk with me. So we're going to build respect with them. But here's a question we want to propose to you guys to have a conversation with each other. What does that look like? We throw respect out there a lot. Children need to learn respect. I need to have respect for my classroom of children. Now put some words with that. What does that actually mean? So have a conversation with each other there at your tables. What does that mean? Were there some teachers that you had that they did this? Maybe you didn't realize at the time that they were building a relationship with you out of respect, but what does that look like? When you walk into a college classroom, what does that look like? So think about some of your own experiences and kind of brainstorm a few things for us. What does building relationships and building respect look like? All right, let's kind of pull you together a little bit. If we could just kind of go around and share, I think we'll start in the back corner back there and just give us a little snippet of your conversation. So what does it mean for you guys? How do you build that respect? What do you see?
I guess building respect, you have to kind of like, you can't be rude, so you got to speak nicely or, in a gentle way kind of.
Good, good. Positive language, that type of thing. Excellent. How about for you guys?
We talked about being like a give and take in the relationships and not just coming in and being like, this is my room, we do it my way, and having kids like be involved in the classroom and what they want to learn about, and showing that the teacher's like interested in the individuals and not just like,
Good.
it's my room and I'm going to do it this way and I don't care what you say.
Avoid that whole authoritarian, it's my way or the highway. Have you guys, we were just talking about this, have you ever heard that saying that a lot of teachers will say, stay mean until Halloween? Have you guys ever heard that? Maybe that's our generation thing. There was always this old saying that, you go in, you get your classroom for the first day and stay mean until Halloween. And then you can kind of back off a little bit. But setting that tone right away that you're going to be, positive with them in your language, not talk down to them, and that you are going to kind of work with them one-on-one. Great. How about for you guys?
We just talked about like just simply being kind, like encouraging and lifting them up, especially like when they're in the classrooms, and maybe like give an answer, maybe it's wrong or right, just how to handle that appropriately. And
Keep building that self-esteem, motivation for them to want to take that initiative and continue on. Good. How about for you guys?
Well, we had a few things touching on what everybody else said, but also stuff like teacher's desk, having it in a way where it's not like this big throne above everybody else. Having stuff like more for younger kids, like chore lists to give them responsibilities in the classroom, and progress things so they can see how well they're doing.
Good.
And then other than that, play avoiding punishment in front of everybody.
Excellent. Yeah, that was one that I had heard you guys say. Did you guys hear that one? Avoiding calling children out in front of everybody else. And you had shared a story about how many of you that happened to you? You were called out. You guys remember the red, green, yellow light on the board, the 3 checks behind your name and you were out. All those public sort of shaming ways. Name on the board. And shaming doesn't promote change in children. You can have those behavior checkpoints with them, but you can do that on a private, individual basis. Good. How about for you guys?
we did independent problem solving, so just letting them kind of solve their own problems while you're kind of overseeing it, so they feel like next time they get into an altercation, they can kind of do it themselves and not have to be
Right.
like, where's the teacher?
Right, because we want them to be able to have those skills when they leave your classroom. Right? Excellent. And last one.
We wrote give positive examples to the kids of what it's like to use manners
kind of be a model for it, model it yourself.
Yeah, we all, like, something that I had in the past was we made, like, when we entered a class, we made a poster with what we wanted, how we wanted the teacher to treat us, and then she would write what she wanted us in return. It kind of shows where, instead of just, we need to do this in my classroom, it gives them kind of the feeling of it goes both ways.
Right, that's an excellent idea, and it also gives the teacher a lot of insight to how you see yourself as a student and getting to know them on an individual basis as well. Then great, thank you. Well, I think you guys were reading my slide because we basically touched on a lot of these. We want students to be very independent, right? We want them to be able to make choices on their own. We wanted to put this example in here for you because this is our children at the lab preschool. This is the bunny room, correct? So these are our 2.5 to 3.5-year-olds, and this is their independent way of signing in the morning when they come. And these are all different examples of them doing that. One is a puzzle with their name. One is writing it on a chalkboard, writing it in the salt or sand, but it's their independent way of marking themselves being in for the day. So we want to find, and even with very young children, you can find those ways for them to be independent. You guys talked about this, the back table, using encouragement, being positive with children. How you phrase things could make or break how they feel about themselves. And we know that those things stick with us, right? Even at your age, they've stuck with you, the positives and the negatives.
Everyone's been in a classroom, either observing or in a classroom when a child is called out or embarrassed in front of the group, and how for all of us there's that like, oh. And so trying to always say in the classroom, but the teacher sets the tone for that. And that sort of language, the teacher, regardless if they're toddlers or if they're in second grade, the teacher really sets the tone of how is that going to be accepted.
Yeah, how they will treat each other too. You set the tone on how children will engage and interact with each other. And I was so glad that you guys talked about this, that you do need to have some sort of way to manage behavior in the classroom, that children check in and you check in with them, but it doesn't need to be public. That should not be the first thing you make at the end of summer before the start of your school year is your behavior management posted chart that's going to go on the wall. That's the first thing that children see when they walk into your room. Talk about setting the tone for the school year. It can be done on a very private basis. Some children need high fives, some children need stickers. Some children need that little M&M slid across the table of thanks buddy, I really appreciate what you did today. We know that they need those behavior kind of management tools, but we want you to make sure that you keep it with children's self-esteem in mind. I just saw the sign, I thought it was the coolest thing. It kind of sets the tone for the classroom. In this classroom, we're going to respect each other, try our best, work as a team, learn from our mistakes, create, and we're going to celebrate each other's successes. I think one of the greatest things I've seen in a classroom is when another child has noticed the success from another child and has run to a teacher and said, you know, so-and-so can now put his own shoes on. Or I looked at their math paper and they got it this time, and the whole class celebrates that success. That's building that sense of community. All right, daily structure. You gotta have one, right? You have to have a routine. How many of you know your day is gonna be packed with so much stuff of what you have to get done, right? Not only do you have that going on in your classroom of just what you have to do, but now kids have to go do these special things, right? They have to go see someone else for a language class or for art or for their computers. So we need to have some sort of daily structure. It needs to be flexible yet consistent. Have you noticed that children will tell you, very young children, kindergartners, they'll say what their daily routine is? And they have to touch base with you every once in a while. So after lunch, we go to computers, right? And you're like, yep, after lunch, we go to computers. And that's the same every day, right? Yep, every day. They need that sense of security that that schedule is going to stay the same. This is always going to follow this. Where do you guys think the flexibility comes in? Why would we have to be flexible at times? Go ahead.
Because each student learns differently, so we have to give out a different lesson on the same subject.
Yeah, you might be tweaking it this way for this student and this way for this way, but it's still math time. It's still science time or something like that. What else? Yeah.
Also, like something like a tornado drill or fire drill.
They always come at the worst
To
times.
be responsive to those sorts of things.
And there may just be things that children need more time on, or someone else needs more time on and somebody else is ready to move ahead. So we need to make sure it's consistent. One of the things that I really like is that there's some way for children to track that daily schedule so they can see it. Again, this is with our 2.5 to 3-year-olds, but we have pictures of the children actually doing it, and you notice what the mover is. How is the get marked? The star. So there's some sort of mover that takes them through that day. So they can go look at the schedule and go, oh, the star's on this right now.
And I have a Great Start classroom at Ford that we also work with, and they actually, when they make a transition to the next thing, she actually has her whiteboard, and that's part of it. They go up to it and check it and say, okay, so we've done this, this, and this, and that's a group of children who are a little bit more vulnerable children who haven't had a lot of experience with routines in their lives. I think we also have to remember that not every child comes to us having had consistency and routine in their daily life. So it's so important. We know that's one of the things of how children are really going to be able to succeed, is being able to have that consistency and routine. But that is also not something that every child has had prior to coming into your classroom. Not every child has had a very consistent routine. Sometimes their experiences up to that point have not been very consistent.
In part of this making it visually for children, these are examples of young children and having that visual schedule for them. But you could do this in an elementary classroom, but you may also have where each student has a planner. And then visually you're pulling that out somewhere through the day and you're making sure children are checking in on that planner. So somehow you're helping them work through that routine or that schedule. The other thing that I see that when I go into classrooms a lot, one of the things that teachers always forget about is how they move children from one activity to the next, or from one space in the school to the next space in the school. And I always see a lot of chaos with this. Just like you're planning your daily schedule, you have to plan for those transition times as well. You can't just think, oh, thank goodness they get to go to art next. Whoo, I'm ready to get them out of this room. Open up the door, you're going to art. There they go, right?
And that's often when you start to hear the
yeah.
Yeah,
stop it. Yep.
Between children and teachers, because there really isn't a plan, or it's always the same plan every day. You know, I see the hips and lips kind of thing, have one hand on, the hips, one on the lips, or, all these sorts of strategies, but it's typically the same one every day, instead of trying to find different ways in which to make those transitions.
The reason it's so important to plan for those transitions is because if you're worried about classroom management and you don't plan for those transitions, that's when you're going to see behaviors that you don't want to see. What happens when you line children up and you make them stand in a line and you wait? What do? They push and shove. I always call it the bump. They do, whoop, 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 right? And the person in front of them has now gone like this, and the person behind them has now gone like this, and they bumped in, and it's this domino and this trickle effect, right? Or you think you finally get them all in a line, and then what's going to happen? What's one of them going to do? Yeah, cut. Sneak off on a different line, right? So you've got to plan for those transitions. Otherwise, once again, remember that term I used? Adult cause behavior problems, because you haven't planned for that transition. So, holler out. What are some of the fun transitions that you remember your teachers doing in your classrooms? Not flicking the lights. Those were never fun, right? Do you guys remember this one?
Oh, peace and quiet.
Peace and quiet. Okay, what else do you guys remember? Do you remember doing anything fun when you had to move from one space to the next? 1, 2, 3, eyes on me.
I remember in music class in elementary school, whenever we weren't paying attention, our music teacher would do ba ba da da bum, eyes up. That's what I remember most in elementary school.
Good. How many of you just remember the things, if you can hear me, clap, clap. If you can hear me, clap, clap. Well, we can get a little bit more inventive with those transitions than just those types of things. Like Jane Ann was saying, do you want to do the same thing all the time? I don't know about you guys, but if any of you are Pinterest people, and you go out and you Pinterest classroom management or transitions, you're going to get some really cool stuff right now on Pinterest. There's some great ideas. There are people who have made videos of chants that you can do, or cheers that you can do, songs that you can do, and it's a really good idea to have kind of transition kits. Have things by the doors in your classrooms that have all of your transition ideas on it, and as you're standing there with your children getting ready to walk them to computers, you can pull one of those out and say, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to all pretend we're this, or we're going to do this, or we're going to say this chant. And it's right there by your door. It's a song, or it's something that you're going to do. So I thought this one was really cute. These were just a couple of chants that I found, but have something right there by the door that you can grab. That way your planning's already done. Yes, ma'am.
In a classroom that I observed in, she had everybody line up with a partner, so 2 lines, and then whatever they were happened to be studying, she might say, hey, when we're walking to the gym, I want you guys to talk about the dinosaur, whatever.
It's a great idea.
History lesson we just talked about, or name 3 of your favorite things we talked about today.
Yeah.
So they were she knew they were going to talk, but having them have like a point instead of just screaming and yelling.
Yep. And it's that the whole point that you just said, she knew they were going to talk. You know children are going to talk during transition, so why fight with yourself to make it so they can't talk? You know, it's like taking recess away for kids who can't sit still. You know, why would you kind of shoot yourself in the foot that way? So you know that's part of their development, so you're going to work around it accordingly.
Preschool classroom also, if you are toddler classroom, if you just look at how many transitions are in the day, it's about 1/3 of the day. The transition in, the transition to clean up, to go outside, the transition to the next thing, so to breakfast or to lunch or to nap time or whatever it is. So when you look at all that time in the day, it's much longer than circle time, but people plan all this energy around circle time and no time around transitions. And so that's another thing when I often go in to do observation feedback with programs, is to say, let's just work on some new transition activities. That turning the light on and off, is that working? Well, no, not really. So trying to come up with, and as Deb said, I think it's such a great idea, the whole idea of having those things in a central spot so people don't necessarily have to think about it, but can just go to it and the words are right there. Eventually that bag of tricks gets easier because you have more ideas and you become more seasoned. But I've seen teachers who always have on index cards like 30 songs, they have it by the door, they pull it out, and the children know, or they have a new song and they add one to that index cards. Of saying, okay, which one do you think it is? And then they turn to it and that's their song for that day or that week. Or some rooms do it with rhyming, that they have some sort of nursery rhyme for preschoolers each week so that the children have an opportunity to, that whole piece too about having it be directed around some type of curriculum support too.
Part of what you're going to run the risk of if you don't plan for that transition, or if you use the same one all the time, children become desensitized to it. It's like your alarm clock. How many of you don't even hear your alarm clock anymore, but yet your roommate or whoever it is like, that has been going off for the last 10 minutes? You're desensitized to it. The light flicking is going to, kids won't even notice it after a while. Did you have something you wanted to say? You talk about the alarm clock? Yeah. That is so me. That's the thing. And so when you change it up, you kind of catch them off guard, and you've now piqued their interest, because they're going to pay more attention because you've done something that's unique and something that you haven't done before. All right, our last set of points here, our expectations. You guys have talked about this a little bit already, but this is so important for me. I know when I teach my guidance class, is that we keep children's self-esteem intact. And it's so important to have a lot of yeses and talk positively with children. And when you're needing to redirect their behavior, you should be telling them what they can do instead of what they can't do. You guys have heard that before, right? State it in terms so they know what it is they can do. One of the things that's really important, and here's that developmental side coming out, children cannot mentally reverse before the age of 7. So when you're sitting in a classroom and you're saying to children, don't run, don't run, don't run.
What do they hear? Run.
And they tend to run faster. And you're like, why are they running more? I'm saying don't run.
And then the teacher's voice gets louder.
And they run even more because they're trying to run away.
You have to remember, just developmentally, they're not there to be able to do that. So by saying it over and over, they're just not going to developmentally be able to make that shift. And that often happens in preschool classrooms too, that they're saying what they don't want the children to do instead of what they can do. And that's a real shift.
I think this is such a great example of writing rules, your expectations. You need to have them, right? And you know you want to have them in your classroom. And if you're working with older children, they can help you write the classroom guidelines. Remember, we want a sense of community. We want them to buy in. We want them to feel a part of that classroom. Have them help you write the guidelines. What's important for us to remember while we're in this classroom? Let's make an expectation sheet. Let's make a guideline sheet. But these, again, are our 3s and our 4s. Here are the way their rules are written. We're going to walk, except. Here's where we're going to let you know you can run. These are some good spots that you can do that. We're going to hold hands when we go outside. They didn't say, you're not going to walk by yourself. They said you're going to hold hands and you're going to walk with someone else. You're going to use your words to solve problems. This one's really important because their playground, they're riding bikes everywhere. So you're going to wear a helmet when you're riding a bike. But it's put in terms of that they know what it is they can do. Same thing, another example of an area in a classroom. Their limits, 3 very specific limits. I like this idea because I also like for when someone visits your classroom, they see the purpose of your center. What are your goals for that area?
I also think from a new teacher standpoint, what are your goals for that? That's also a big part of your own journey, is to think about what are the expectations of that, so that you can be clear with the children and students in your classroom, so that you're doing this work, and particularly in elementary classrooms where you're typically the only one in that room, and really being clear about what are my expectations, and is that developmentally where we should be expecting. And I think that whole part of that can also be your building culture too. We certainly are in some elementary buildings that that there's a real culture around certain limits that, when you're in the hallway, this, or in your classroom,
Right.
this.
Yeah, there's a school expectation for behavior. One of the things that's really critical, again, for your students in the classroom, you don't want to be the only person picking up. If you're the adult in the room, you're going to spend a lot of time doing that. Your students want responsibility in the classroom. Children like responsibility. Take advantage while they're young that they want to do some work, right? They want to pick up. They want to have jobs. I thought these were really 2 good examples. This, of course, is an example for young children in a classroom, that even our youngest of children can have classroom responsibilities. But I want to tell you a little bit about this one that I saw. This was a 3rd grade classroom, and I thought this teacher did such an excellent job of connecting writing activities with children's classroom responsibilities. She made a help wanted board, and she had all of the classroom jobs posted as help wanted kind of ads that you would put in a newspaper. And then as a writing assignment, children actually had to fill out a job application for whichever particular job they wanted, and they had to interview with her for it. I thought it was the coolest idea because she tied in so many things.
Being able to make those really strong connections to some children finding their gifts also.
Yeah, but what great skills for conversation, for writing, that hits a lot of your standards. And the last thing, and I heard you guys mention this, we need children to have ways to problem solve, and they need tools. We spend a lot of time saying to children, use your words, right? That's pretty nondescript when you think about it. Because what do we have the potential of having happen when you say to a child, use your words?
Get real mean.
Yeah, they might get really mean. Those are my words. And I want to use them right now, right? We didn't define what kind of words we want them to use. So you might need to be specific, or you might need to give them some tools. In order for them to learn how to manage their behavior, they might need you to guide them along the way. Gabby, you said this. Help them learn those problem-solving tools, and then maybe the next time they'll have that in place to use it. And I just thought this was such a cool idea. This actually, you could put an arrow to spin on this, and when children are having a conflict, maybe there's an area in the classroom that you can define as that sort of safe spot to go and work out our conflicts. Two people are having a conflict, we're going to spin the dial and we're going to see what the solution's going to be. That way children aren't always having to come up with all those solutions on their own.
A good friend of mine's a principal, and she had a child in her office who had been in her office several times over the, a few weeks' time. And she said, so what else could you do? And it was, we talk about kids kind of living in their, when in the heat of the moment, they often can't process that, but 2 minutes later they can. But he really didn't, she thought, gosh, I think it was second grade. She's like, of course he would have some ideas of what he could do. And I think that the teachers had assumed he knew. And she said, okay, well, do you have any ideas? And he was just like, no. And that the count to 10, she said, well, one thing you could do is just count to 10. And he looked at her so puzzled, like, okay. And so she said, okay, let's practice it. And so, okay, someone's picking on you, someone just pushed you, okay. And so he practiced in her office, but she, thought, my gosh, I never thought in second grade that would have been something as a skill, a technique that he wouldn't know. And sometimes we have to remember that not all children come to us with the depth of those things that we would hope for. But being able to do that became, she said she could literally, she talked to the teacher about it, said, I think we need to work with him on some different, how to solve these problems. And it was amazing, she said. It didn't get perfect, but he certainly started, she could see him doing like that. But I think that this does give some ability for children who are in that moment of not knowing what to do.
Right, giving them those tools, kind of those tricks in their bag to go to. All right, we know you guys have been sitting for a while, so we just want to come back and have you revisit your posters. Think about all the things we said. Go back and look at your posters. How many things did you have the same? Did you have a lot of the same tips, a lot of the same 4 key points that we talked about? Was there anything on your poster that you would change or word differently? Even with older age groups of children, you can have stations and you can have center areas. Those don't have to go away. Thank you so much for your participation today. It was a long time to sit, but hopefully you feel like you have a couple takeaways that you can go away with today. And Tricia, I'm seeing a theme for another workshop. Transitions, maybe all different kinds of transition ideas. What do you think, guys? And conflict resolution tools to use in a classroom. So we might have some future workshops there. But thank you. Hopefully you guys got something out of this today and you have some takeaways, like I said, to go with you. If you have anything in particular you want to ask us about, feel free to come up and ask. But we appreciate your attendance today. A little worried when I saw the snow this morning. And so thank you very much.